Emmanuel I.Archibong, Dr. Emmanuel Archibong, actually, who will talk about the allegory of the tortoise in African folklores, implications for the phenomenology of experience of children. The floor is yours, Emmanuel.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here once again. The last time I was here was in 2020 during the pandemic year. Okay, so we'll go straight to the point. By way of introduction, it's important we understand the place of stories, myths, legends, folktales, and folklores as told in African cultural setting. And of course, in doing this, animals are actually used as representative symbols in communicating some very important fundamental truths. And this is done by virtue of the fact that African sages actually do a lot of naive observation, what you may call naive realism, with respect to studying the behaviors of animals and what actually characterizes these animals, what makes them unique and distinct. So that is why animals are actually used to be able to represent certain truths. For example, the tortoise is actually seen as an animal that is very wise and full of ideas. And of course, the lion is known for his strength and his kingly disposition. The snake is actually typified as being very slow. The snake is subtle. The leopard is inconsistent in character. The fox is very fast and tricky. The tiger is smart and fast. The hawk is a killer, and so on and so forth. So, the use of allegory in African cultural or traditional worldview setting is occasioned by the fact that truth can be interrogated using several mediums. And this is the reason why allegories are actually used in scholarship. And of course, in talking about the use of allegories, it is not only peculiar to Africa. Even the Greek culture also uses allegories. And of course, Plato is very famous for his allegory of the cave, where he used that to typify the problem of reality and appearances. Now, phenomenology is going to be the theoretical framework we are going to use in actually looking at this particular issue, this particular topic. And of course, Edmund Husserl is very much known as the father of phenomenology, because he was actually the one who tried to study our consciousness or life of consciousness. So, having said that, what are actually the problems the study tries to want to deal with or attempt to deal with? Number one is to identify why stories found in folklores about animal characters, how they phenomenologically affect the minds of children, the pure minds of children. Now, we want to also examine why the tortoise, whose character is either implicitly or explicitly helps to create a sense of virtue or vices in the formative minds of African children. Why the tortoise is at the forefront. We want to also observe that because the tortoise seems to be one animal that is predominantly used in African setting, African cultural setting, especially with regards to the aspect of telling stories. So after that, we'll identify why the study of phenomenology of human experience of the self and others is being shaped by cultural affinity to a society. Then some of the objective of the study is, number one, to examine how human experience can be better harnessed in the right direction for the educational pedagogy of young children in their understanding and application of care of universal concept, of core universal concept rather. We also understand how the allegory of the tortoise in its many negative metaphors and representation in African folklores affects the subjective experience of African children, especially in the way they view the world. Now, let's begin with asking the question, what are folktales? What are folktales? Folktales are a traditional genre of literature which plays a very important role in the transmission of worthwhile knowledge in pupils. This knowledge has a lot to do with the educational, cultural, religious, and social ideologies of that culture or community. Folktales are integral part of African society. You cannot actually separate the oral tradition of Africa from folktales. You can't, because folktales are actually the medium through which Africans are able to reveal some very basic or fundamental truths about reality. Now, in the pre or post-colonial Africa, there is the tradition of getting children to sit under a large baobab tree where they are taught a lot of ideals through folktales, which invariably shapes their young minds and the perception of the world from their subjective or egoistic position. So that also tells us the importance of folktales. And then, of course, in Africa, formal education is achieved through institutions, while informal education, which carries cultural and societal values through generations, are transmitted through folklores and folktales. So folktales are very significantly important in the African communal life, because that is where reality is condensed in stories, in varied manners of metaphors and representations, in a bid to educate, or in a bid to educating the young ones by transmitting worldwide educational instruction to them. Now, what is phenomenology of experience? Phenomenology of experience. According to Edmund Husserl, phenomenology is the science of pure phenomena. For him, it is the theory of the essence of pure phenomenon, of knowing. Such a phenomenology will advance the critique of knowledge, in which the problem of knowledge is clearly formulated and the possibility of knowledge rigorously secured. Phenomena of the subjective level of reality is what phenomenology as a philosophy and method is concerned about. This enables the individual subject to interrogate reality from the first person point of view. And this of course is very, very important, because when we talk about consciousness, or when we talk about subjective consciousness, we are looking at the first person point of view. So you cannot talk about the consciousness of the other person without first interrogating your own consciousness and how you view reality. This is what phenomenology as a method and philosophy tries to establish. Then phenomenology as a philosophy and method is essential to the determination of reality, especially when, excuse me, when we bracket other idiosyncrasies and presuppositions in the quest for truth. This is what Husserl talks about. Even Heidegger, of course, another prominent phenomenologist, talk about bracketing or bringing together what we call the epoche. That's, you bracket what you think you knew before now, just to be able to get into some kind of truth that you have never really encountered. Even Descartes, René Descartes actually used that methodic doubt to be able to arrive at the cogito, which is I think, therefore I am. So just as every other school of thought is with their shortcomings, phenomenology is not an exception. It has been criticized using the basis of words, with a lot of critics seeing the philosophy as too mentally absorbed. But that notwithstanding, there's still a lot we can learn from phenomenology as a philosophy and as a method. Now, moving over to the allegory of the tortoise. We are still coming back to the tortoise because we want to understand what makes the tortoise unique and what makes African folklores to be replete with a lot of stories that borders on the tortoise, or stories that have the tortoise as its major character or protagonist. Now, the tortoise is a renowned figure in African folklore because of his character representation. Tortoise represents the lack of integrity, trust, truth-telling, and forthrightness. Yet, it is seen as a character of ideas, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. You see, despite the negative representation of the tortoise also has some positive light or some positive side, which is that the tortoise is actually full of ideas, it has wisdom, it has knowledge and understanding. And of course, we are going to use a particular story that tries to typify the character or the behavior of the tortoise. And that is where we're actually going to show how greedy the tortoise is and how this particular negative aspect of the character of the tortoise can actually affect how children perceive reality. Of course, because of the issue of folktales, stories, and all of that. Excuse me. Now, let me go through the story. Once upon a time, in the animal kingdom, there was a famine. The animals in the kingdom all starved and took very lean and took very little except the birds. When the tortoise noticed this, he decided to find out from the birds where they got their food. The birds refused, citing the tortoise cunning as a reason why they wouldn't disclose it. The tortoise continued to plead and promised not to play any tricks, because of course, tortoise is known for playing tricks. They told him of a feast held high up in the heavens for anyone who could make it up there. The tortoise thought about it and realized that it would be impossible for him to get to the heavens because he had no wings. However, an idea struck him. Don't forget, we have said that the tortoise is a man of idea. He said, if only each of you will lend me a feather to attach to my body, which will serve as a wing. The birds agreed and gave him a feather to attach to his body to form wings. Before they left, the birds asked him to take a ceremonial name, one which he will be addressed by when he gets to the heaven. After thinking about it, the tortoise said he will be called every one of you. And so they left for the feast. When they arrived, they were welcomed by the host of heaven and led to a table where a banquet was prepared. This food is for every one of you, said the host before leaving. At that point, the tortoise stepped forward and reminded them that his name was every one of you, and as such, the food belonged to him alone. He then went ahead to eat the entire food. When it was done, his smooth shell shone brightly. The birds were very angry with him, and they all agreed to take back their feathers, leaving him with no wings. The tortoise, however, pleaded with one of the birds to take a message home for him. Tell my wife to bring out the softest materials, the beds and pillows in my house, and put them under the heavens so that I can land safely when I jump down. The bird agreed to take the message, but when he got to the house of the tortoise, he changed the message. The husband has instructed that you bring out the hard and strong materials in the house. Put in the house out in the open, he said. When he had finished, the tortoise leapt down from the heavens and crashed into the hard materials. His smooth shell shattered into several pieces. It took the best healer in the land to put his shell together. Thus, until this day, the tortoise has a broken shell as a reminder of what his greed cost him. Now, this kind of story is actually very prominent in African traditional setting, especially in Nigeria and every other African country. They have it in different, narratives. Now, the folk tale is fundamental to giving us more insight about the personality of the tortoise as captured in the story, as well as providing the necessary materials needed for an evaluation of the phenomenology of experience of children. So we are going to do some evaluation now very fast about the implication of this kind of folk tales, this kind of stories to the pure minds of children. Now, since children are a product of the society and their immediate environment, what goes around in their environment affects their experience of reality. In African traditional and contemporary setting, folk tales are still very fascinating to children in their infancy. Whether told under a tree or through audiovisual modes, it still captivates the pure minds of the children and helps in their imagination and moral compass. Now, since phenomenology is concerned basically about the first person experience of the world, the experience of children, especially with regards to the kind of stories they are told as representing the world, has a lot of lasting impact on their minds, on their psyche, and this shapes their perception about what is right, for what is wrong, what is good, for what is bad. Society, therefore, has a responsibility towards the moral and knowledge development of the child. Instructions latent in folk tales should be construed in such a manner that it helps in the phenomenal development of the child in a positive direction. And of course, this is for everybody. What we put together into stories, what we put together into audiovisual materials, especially for the consumption of the children, must be such that must be carefully shifted out, must be carefully thought through, because what we represent there has a lot of positive or negative effects on the children, on their growth as they develop. So the characteristics of essence and intentionality in phenomenology has a bearing on the conscious or mental formation of the child as it comes in contact with reality, through folklores, even if it's at the elementary level of cognitive assimilation, as directed by the protagonist, which in this case represents various human characters and behavior. Now, let's evaluate all we have said so far. The existential lived experience of the conscious subject is fundamental to the understanding of reality. This is where this study becomes relevant in its application to the experience of children who are exposed to folk tales that present a character or a protagonist in a certain light, and that can shape their perception about reality, either positively or negatively. It must be stressed that the principle as adumbrated in this work, in this paper, though localized, can be applied on a more universal scale, cutting across various cultures, whether the Western culture, whether the Oriental culture. The principles are the same and they can be applied universally, even though they may also have a local source, or it may have a local base, but it can be applied universally because the world has been bridged by information and communication technology, which is ICT. Now, as audiovisual content are prepared for children, care must be taken to ensure that it contains useful knowledge and moral narratives that will help the conscious imagination of children in order to make them more humane and even eco-friendly. For example, now we are talking about climate change and all of that. How do we try to get the minds of these children to be focused on the dangers of climate change? It is by using these principles to be able to get content that are valid, content that are useful, and then you teach them. From there, they will begin to appreciate the challenges that we have faced as humans, our existence and all of that. And as they grow up, it will actually shape their mindset, either positively or negatively. So as I conclude, it is clear that children can be assisted to appreciate consciousness. They can also be assisted to be able to form positive side of consciousness, or get to appreciate the positive side of consciousness, and also have an experience that gives value to their individual existence. This is the essence of the idea of phenomenology as a philosophy and a method, and one that holds great promises, both with regards to theory and practice, for positive influence for children's cognitive development, and of course, for their love for the world which they find themselves in, and for the other, which is humanity in general. So that is basically what this paper actually tries to achieve. We want to be able to see how, why we are telling stories, why we are, whether as a folk tale, folklore, legend, myth, or what have you, we must do everything possible we can to ensure that the conscious development of the child, that aspect that makes the child a child, is actually taken care of, so that we don't distort, their worldview, we don't distort their mindset, and in the process help them to misrepresent reality. All of these will not be, will not go well for us as humans, and of course for our world. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for your presentation. We have one question in the chat already by I.Archibong. He's asking, do you think that the actual tortoise behaviors inspired the tales, or that humans projected their stories in animals from the standpoint of the human-tortoise relationship? For instance, some animals might not have some behaviors with the animals they usually interact with, but they appear so from the standpoint of humans.
Yeah, you see, when we talk about animal behavior, every keen observer, everyone who has that scientific attitude, or what you may call naive realism, can be able to actually, observe or study a particular animal and be able to bring out certain traits that is unique to that particular animal. So if that can be established, then we can be able to say, okay, this is how this particular animal behaves, or this is what this particular animal represents. And that should not really be a problem, because, of course, even animal behaviorists, those who study animal behavior, will tell you that there are certain characteristics, certain features that differentiate one particular animal from the other. So we can actually study animals and be able to bring out what makes them unique, what makes them different, what makes them in their own class, in their own world. And of course, this behavior, whether you call it conscious behavior, whether behavior through stimulus or what have you, can help us to be able to get to know that this particular animal behaves in this particular manner, different from this particular one. So I think observation, experiment, and all of that, careful observation can help in that particular aspect. I hope I've been able to answer that particular question, because I didn't really get a particular aspect while you were speaking.
Oh, I think it's fine. Our time is up now anyway, but there are further questions in the chat and they can ask them directly to you on the Discord channel. Okay?
Okay. All right.
Thank you again, Emmanuel. We will now have a 30